I think the 2020 election is sort of mid-course in a fundamental shift that we're seeing in the electoral system. We don't know exactly where it's going to go, but it's not the same electoral system that it was. And we can see that in the number of Democrats who are vying for it, and the number of outsiders, relatively outsiders like Pete Buttigieg, who has a very serious attempt. Oh, and a lot of women who in the past wouldn't have bothered to run, like Amy Klobuchar, all having a serious run at the presidency. This is really something interesting to see, and we're about halfway through the transformation. So I think we should all just buckle up, put the popcorn in the microwave, and see what happens. Yes, I do think that Bernie Sanders, who was the upstart against Hillary Clinton and the only one to have the courage to run against her besides one other candidate, his time seems to be maybe have passed a bit, and Elizabeth Warren's time seems to be more current than his. He's still very strong, and he has a lot of support among young people in a way that she doesn't. And so it's not over for Bernie, but his time was 2016, and he probably peaked sometime around then. No, I think the only notable challenge to President Trump is whether he remains in office. I don't think he'd be removed by the Senate, but he could resign, making Mike Pence the incumbent running for re-election. In that case, there would be significant challenge, but Pence probably would be the only viable Republican nominee other than Trump. But it's all up to whether President Trump, whether or not he stays in office. It's interesting, the latest numbers of this election show that clearly the Democrat would win the popular vote, but it's not clear that they would win the Electoral College vote. And so it's sort of an exaggeration of the trend of what we saw in 2016, where odds are a Democratic nominee right now would get several million votes more than President Trump, but President Trump very well could still win the Electoral College vote. President Trump is likely to lose by a larger margin than he lost the popular vote the last time. But again, the Electoral College vote, we've become so polarized that states are seeing even larger movements away from or toward the candidate. And so Trump is actually doing better in some states, even as he's doing far worse in most others. And so that makes for a really interesting Electoral College challenge. And I think the Democrats have a very, very steep climb to win the Electoral College, regardless of who the nominee is. I think the impeachment numbers have shifted a little bit away from Trump. However, I think his support has gotten far more solidified. So there are fewer people who say, well, I can be convinced that Trump is not the right person. So I don't think that there's going to be much more of a shift away from Trump, but I think the valence or the intensity of people who oppose Trump is getting stronger too. And so that will be an important factor in their vote determination. So people will vote on the basis of Trump being impeached or removed or not removed. And so I think this is an election about Trump. It's not about the campaign. Well, this is the kind of election where the campaign isn't going to really matter very much. I think most voters have made up their mind, and there's a relatively narrow number of voters, maybe 10% of the population, that either will be demobilized, which is the strategy of the Trump administration, or mobilized, which is the strategy of whichever Democrat gets that nomination, and they will determine the outcome. So if they stay home, odds are President Trump will win.